Good afternoon, everyone. It's Thankful Thursday, and I purposely put my business partner, my mentor, my friend with me, the double B, Blaine Bartlett, here with me, BlaineBartlett.com, every Thursday, because the simple things to do are unfortunately simple not to do. And that's one of the lessons I've learned working with Blaine, because it's simple to work with Blaine. And Blaine, we are so blessed to be together. I just want to start out by saying thank you on Thankful Thursday.
Thank you, my friend. I could not agree with you more. I love working with you since the very beginning. This is, when we wrote that book together, it was one of the easiest writing projects I've ever done.
Well, it certainly was easier for me than it was for you. I just got to tell stories as you taught me the lessons. And talking about easy to do, I'm not sure. There's several things, but we're a little bit older. And, I look around sometimes, take, for example, Chat GPT. And I'm thinking, I never thought in my lifetime I'd see something like that. And then I just went to the Zinger Automobile Factory, the world's first 3D printed luxury race car and cars, and $600 million they've invested. And, I literally walked around there with Colleen, who and you also mentor as well. In the actual Yale engineer and his son, they actually didn't think that would be available for another 20 years where they're at today. But we were talking about the simple things to do, unfortunately simple not to. I never thought I'd be able to order beer online. And boy, I'm going to college. Some of the things I'm glad don't exist when I was in college, but this is one of those things, an online beer store, shopbevana.com. It is Nirvana of Bevana. And we have the Senior Director of Business Development of Bevana with us, Aaron Gore. Thank you, number one. And thank you again for joining us. How are you today?
Doing fantastic, Blaine. And I just have to say, it's wonderful working with you guys, too. I really feel like our next book, titled to be determined, time to be released to be determined, existence to be determined, is going to be absolutely spectacular. But a few beers is definitely going to make any writing go a little quicker.
It's already happened. We just haven't arrived yet.
Exactly, man. We're just as you say, Aaron, we're just a few clicks away from that book, as we are a few clicks away from the finest local craft beverages delivered globally. Give me a little bit of insight first on, how this all came to fruition, because, it wasn't any internet when I was a kid, but the minute I started in 1992 working on the internet with West Publishing, man, I would have loved. They thought I was crazy when I bought a car online. I certainly would have loved. I'm from San Diego. There's some pretty great craft beers. I would have loved to have those suckers delivered where I was around the world.
Yeah, no, at the time, to your point, being in the college age, that's a little bit more dangerous to have that at your fingertips. But by the same token, the beautiful thing about craft beers, it's not like anybody's trying to plow through a 30 rack of them in one fell swoop.
Yeah, no.
No, we originally grew
honest, most college kids could afford 3 of them, so we'd be much safer. It'd be fine.
It's an affordable luxury. That's how we treat it, and that's how we promote ourselves. But we actually grew out of D9 Brewing Company right here out of Cornelius, North Carolina. And as we grew, we were one of the fastest growing breweries in the entire Southeast, and realized that a lot of the challenges that we were facing just keeping up with our own growth were ones that a lot of companies were facing very similarly. Just the ability to be able to get product to customers, the ability to be able to keep up with your own scale. A lot of these companies are the proverbial dog that caught the car. What do you do at that point? So a lot of the solutions that we found for ourselves, we realized were cross applicable. They were things that we would really be able to turn into a platform and really be able to help other companies with. So outside of just being able to order beer online, which is a huge part of what we do, we also help breweries not only scale their production, but also scale distribution and access into the stores, and just help people be able to connect with breweries, connect with kombucha companies, connect with seltzer companies, hemp companies that otherwise they'd never have the opportunity to enjoy, just based on where they're at and the realities of the economics of it all.
When I was going to college, and this goes back more years than I care to share, and this was the University of Oregon, we couldn't get Coors beer in Oregon. We had to actually drive across the state line to buy it. And boy, have times changed. So I was struck by not only the idea that you grew your own brewery and scaled it and whatnot, but how have you been? And this is I'm just fascinated by this because the liquor laws are not universally equal across states. Now you've got a federal line here, but each state has its own particular way of looking at this. How do you navigate that? Because you are, throughout the U.S. Yeah. How did you learn to navigate that? And from a distribution standpoint, how do you actually work with a local small craft brewer to get them across the state line into other markets?
Yeah, so you're 100% correct. The liquor laws in this country are an absolute mess. We like to joke that we basically have 50 small countries spot welded together. So the short answer on how we're able to make it all work and how we're able to navigate all of that is, I don't sleep. So that tends to help. But aside from that, a lot of it is just exactly that. I mean, like any good business that's trying to penetrate a red ocean, you need a blue ocean business model. So our big role was to be able to consolidate all of the things that are scalable, consolidate, frankly, all the things that breweries don't want to be doing anyways. Breweries don't want to manage wide scale distribution. They don't want to manage scalable production. They don't want to manage wholesale and distribution. They got into this to make good beer and to connect with people. We want to get them back to that. Yeah. That's what got me into this industry, but I also am well aware of the fact that, we need specialization. The industry is maturing very rapidly. So our role in the industry is to find those areas, those seams where we're able to really be able to cross that bridge and do something that for them, they'd have to be replicating it. There's 9,500 breweries in the US, 9,500 times. If we're able to bring that all in-house, bring that under one umbrella and do that for them and let them get back to the innovation, the creativity, the narrative building, the creative aspect that they really are passionate about and for the most part more skilled at, that's really where we live.
And within the context of delivering, is there a different packaging requirement or some sort of nuance that is maintained as a standard throughout, no matter what people are drinking? Do you make them conform to certain packaging and deliverable standards?
Yeah, the more you're able to standardize, the better you're able to get your unit economics under control. I don't think it's any mystery to anybody that if you're trying to do 8 trillion things and there's no standardization, that gets really expensive very, very quickly. So we try to stick to cans, but within that, good news is cans are pretty popular, but we can do 12-ounce cans, 12-ounce sleeks, which is, like White Claw, Truly cans. We can do 16-ounce cans, pretty much anything as long as it's aluminum. Big issue with bottles is not only are they heavy, but they're also really tall. And probably the single smartest move we ever made was making sure that our packaging can all fit in the flat rate box. So all of our custom packaging is all still flat rate compliant, which at least lets me know where my upper bound is on shipping, which is also how I'm able to offer free shipping on all orders over $65. I know exactly where my economics are. I know exactly what my unit margins are, and I know what I can do to make it as painless a process for the customer as possible.
Yeah. That idea of standardization, particularly around the packaging, how far in advance did you take into consideration the constraint on packaging before you actually jumped into that side of the pool?
So I've been doing this a very long time. So about the first time one of us had the bright idea to say, hey, we should do ship beer. That was about the moment where we're like, okay, so we're making sure that box is standard and it can fit in a standard common carrier flat rate. Honestly, that was one of the first considerations that we had because pretty much everything flows from there. This whole industry has a whole lot of ways for you to go upside down. So, the biggest thing that we do, even for a lot of our partners in the brick and mortar distribution, is just making sure that they're not upside down because, most of them don't even have a basic, they've never even gone to accounting 101. So if we're able to help them understand where the costs are and help them understand where to actually make money in this, the thing I say over and over is you can make great beer and be a home brewer. Blaine, I know you homebrew yourself. You get into this to sell great beer, and that's a very different phenomenon.
And to sell it, you have to market.
I got into it to drink it.
Well, there's that too.
And I got into it so I could visit Blaine, so I could drink with Blaine, which is great as well. But more importantly, The marketing side of it. We talked and joked about, it's, not a 30 pack of Schaefer Light. There's a certain aspect or demographic that you're addressing when it's an online craft beer delivery globally. What does that demographic look like, and how are you marketing towards what I assume to be a little more sophisticated audience than the fraternities down at Oregon?
Well, slightly more sophisticated. I don't count myself as being too much of a sophisticate. But I will say, first and foremost, for anybody from any regulatory bodies listening, first and foremost, that demographic is over the age of 21. So let's go ahead and start there.
Yeah, thank you.
Outside of that, there's obviously the target market of craft beer, which is basically people who look exactly like me. People between the ages of 25 and 55, white, cis, male, had, pretty much all the above. Usually,
do you need a beard or no beard or beard? Is that a requirement?
Oh, definitely a beard, tattoos, blocky glasses, a knitted cap. I basically am the walking stereotype. But the beautiful thing about this is that, there's so much culture that comes with craft beer, and that's a wonderful thing. It's one of the things that keeps people going. It's also one of the things that can keep it restricted when it comes to target demos. So one of the things that us being able to offer online is it gets people out of that taproom experience that may or may not be a place they feel comfortable, and gets them right to the product that may be their entry point, may be the thing that they're most interested in. Now, I will say the best thing that we've ever done on a marketing standpoint, honestly, was using the breweries that we work with as our best marketing engines, not only as evangelists for us, but every one of our partners shares incentives with us. And that's absolutely critical because it's in their best interest to sell as much beer as possible. It's in our best interest to sell as much beer as possible. So we coordinate with them every step of the way to make sure that not only do we build them a custom landing page on their site, and we make sure that that's as seamless as possible. So if someone is strictly there for High Wire Brewing or strictly there for D9 Brewing, they're able to have that experience. But our big bet is that people are going to poke around and they're going to wind up exploring other things as well. And that's borne out. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but we also make sure we provide them all the resources, and it's actually built into our agreements. Basically, the only requirement we have of our partners is that at least twice a month, they do a social media post where they reference the fact that you're able to buy online at our shop, which most of them were going to anyways. It's in their best interest, but that gives me peace of mind. And truthfully, that's been the best thing that we've ever done because it leverages each and every one of their networks to our benefit. And that's a network effect about as simple and as pure as you can possibly get, because it means that the more products we bring online, the more partners we bring online, the more that our reach grows without us having to incrementally spend a dime on marketing.
Beautiful. Very, very, very nicely done.
Yeah, no, very nicely done. And I think, it's nice to know I can get a craft beer without having to play Crimes Against Humanity or some other silly board game, and also still hang out with my 12-year-old to watch the game when I want to get those types delivered. And I do, as Blaine knows, travel everywhere. So it's nice to know as well that we have that type of flexibility when it comes to craft brewing. And it takes guys that look like you, act like you, and sound like you in order to figure this stuff out. So I want to thank all that. And I will just, as a side note, I love, trivial facts. Is it true that, the other Dave Meltzer is a famous WWE announcer, but were you truly a former professional wrestler? And I thought I may have even seen you in a movie with The Rock and Kevin Hart. Is that true?
Both of those are true. Yeah. So I was professional wrestler in a past life. That was my dream all through my teenage years. So I did that throughout the Southeast and the Northeast, basically from when I was 18. Worked with a decent number of the people that you've seen on TV. Was never fortunate enough to wrestle on TV myself, but still an area I got a lot of love for. But just like craft beer, it's pretty niche, and everybody looks about like me. And yeah, I was also a featured extra in Central Intelligence, movie with The Rock and Kevin Hart. I don't recommend anybody go and watch it. It's absolutely terrible, and I love both of those guys. Wasn't the first time meeting The Rock, but basically spent 3 days hanging out with the two of them. I was about maybe 2 feet away from them while they were filming, just hanging out. So basically 3 straight days, which was awesome. Perks of knowing a casting director. I was supposed to be way off in the background for about 30 minutes. And before I knew it, I found myself right up front.
Hey, now, just full disclosure, I've seen the movie.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's where I saw you.
I'm sorry.
I enjoyed it.
I do like hanging out with Kevin Hart because I feel like I am the Rock when I'm standing next to Kevin Hart. So not too bad. Anyway, my wife's going to now make fun of me when she sees this episode. But thank you so much. I'm putting in my order. If you saw my fingers moving on I was putting in my order, by the way, at Bevana, shop.bevana.com. Get your favorite beers right at your doorstep in a perfectly flat rate delivery system created in part by the Senior Director of Business Development at Bevana, Aaron Gore, the superstar, movie star. Come back and join me. We got plenty of other places to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Thanks,
you having
Aaron.
me on.
So much fun. It's good guess.
That's
All
cool.
right. Well, we now have the opposite side of this. We went from the wrestling world to pure class. And Jenna Brocious is here, spiritual intuitive guide and founder of the Positive Intention Prayer Cards. Well, I'll tell you how dynamic Blaine and I are, Jenna, that as much as we enjoyed Central Intelligence, we also enjoy your type of intelligence as well, the intuitive intelligence. And we both, as members of the Transformational Leadership Council, have worked in positive intention in all types of areas that you are an expert in. And I really would love to talk about how this positive intention is applicable to our emotions. And I think a lot of people don't realize that those are the emotions that either accelerate us to what we think we want or interfere with us in that omniscient, all-powerful, omnipresent, unified system of thought that we're all part and parcel to. So I know you're known as Jenna B Spiritual. It's time to be spiritual on office hours. Welcome, Jenna.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here, you guys.
Yeah,
we're so happy to have you. Well, let's get into your intuitiveness. I have a philosophy that people will get confused about intuition and being an intuitive as yourself, that they try to think that somehow you can reconcile intuition with logic, reason, or facts. And I don't think that's possible. I think a lot of people get in trouble. And my best example is I have a studio at the Wynn Hotel in the lobby, which Blaine graces his presence and comes to shoot with me every once in a while. But I'll go by the craps table because I think it's so funny that there's always a guy at the craps table and they roll a hard 8 and he says, I knew it. I knew it was going to be a hard 8. And I'm thinking to myself, no, you didn't. You sat there for 8 to 10 rolls and you kept saying, it's going to be a hard 8. It's going to be a hard 8. And that has nothing to do with intuition. Intuition raises our awareness that allows us to deal with these emotional topics like worthiness, grief, change, strength, positivity, and love, things that allow us to live at our highest potential. I would love to get your insight on how people misunderstand spiritual intuitiveness.
Well, to be honest with you, my spiritual intuitiveness didn't really kick in until I did the big journey of forgiving and finding peace for myself after a wild childhood. Mm-hmm. And with that came a lot of innerness that I started to understand, and it grew from there. So spiritual intuitiveness is really just being able to tap in and listen. And really it is just listening to God, listening to universe, listening to ourselves. What does our gut say? Is that a hell yes or an oh no? But it's really just, I think it's about going inwards really with that spiritual intuitiveness.
Yeah. That's the difficult part for most people on this planet. Mm-hmm. This is one of those things that's easy to describe and really kind of difficult to do. I've been meditating, since the 1970s. And it's just kind of, okay, the brain is going to do what it's going to do. So I want to just ask this question here. And it's not about meditation necessarily as much as it is that inner stillness where you have access to imagination. And what's your distinction, if any, between imagination and intuition?
Well, I think as a child, I had an environment I was always trying to escape. So my imagination is full at all times, still to this age, because I love to just go off to a place that doesn't exist when I need that moment of, if I'm like frustrated, it's like the place I can go to find my peace is my imagination. But I also think that just being able to sit in silence, which is extremely hard for most people to do, even for 5 minutes at the end of your bed and just sit there with the silence is really a great way to start if we're trying to start at the beginning. But 5 minutes is great. Try 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And you deal specifically too, you have positive intention prayer cards. How do you utilize the intention prayer cards to deal with those topics that were discussed previously, like worthiness, grief, change, strength, positivity, love, etc.?
Well, to be honest with you, during COVID, I was mentally struggling, just trying to keep a positive outlook with a child at home and my husband's at work, and we don't know what's going to happen. And so I just was really trying to find something that had more of a positive outlook. And I felt like a lot of the prayer websites or like apps they had were kind of like doomsday-ish, and it didn't really help me like feel better about anything going on in the world. So after all that really settled down, I was like, I have to create prayer cards where there's a positive outlook with it. There's a positive intention. The words I use are all with a positive, looking forward, moving forward, something better is coming our way. And so I think when we can pray with more of a positive instead of that negative, oh, I don't have this. Well, when you don't have it and you amplify it, all you get is the not having of it. But when we start to think positively and we talk about having it, even though it might not yet be in front of us, that's calling it in more than us just sitting here being grouchy about the negative.
You know, it's interesting because, prayer is one form of gratitude. Mm-hmm. And gratitude, it's impossible to experience gratitude about, in relation to something I believe I don't have.
Right.
So when you begin a gratitude practice or a prayer practice, coming from the position that it's already here, I do have it. Mm-hmm. And your languaging is structured in a way that acknowledges the fact that it does exist. It hasn't manifested yet necessarily, but it's already created. It is in the ether. It will show up if I hold the state. And your words have vibrational components to them. So when you were putting your prayer cards together, intention prayer cards, what did you pay particular attention to when you were selecting the words outside of just a general, move away from not having to having? Is there, was there something that informed your choice of language?
Well, the thesaurus, which I can't even pronounce correctly, was my best friend at that time because I would look up a word and then, go down the list of like, okay, what's that word mean? And I really went deep into the dictionary when I was writing these prayer cards because I was very intentional with how I wanted to project these prayers so that it was moving forward into that positive light. So that the thesaurus was my favorite friend while I wrote these prayer cards.
Yeah. Oh, for Chat GPT back then, huh?
Yeah. Well, yes.
Oops, it looks like we lost David's connection here. He'll get back in. We sometimes drop connections depending on where he and I are both remotely, positioned. We did this in the car one time too. So, how long did it take you? I'm just kind of curious here. And part of the reason I ask is this book over my corner, my shoulder here. Yeah, when COVID hit, I wrote that book, and I wrote it actually in about 6 months. It didn't take much time at all, but the research and everything, I had the time to be able to do that. So how long did it take you to put the full deck together?
I mean, it probably took me 3 months to get all of them together. And then after I wrote the prayers, I went through and there's Bible verses at the bottom of the prayer that correlate with the prayer. I like to make the Bible a little bit more digestible for people. And I felt like putting tiny little verses in there kind of helped that happen. So the prayer verses or the Bible verses was the hardest part for me to find because I just wanted it to be so perfect. And at some point I had to let go of that perfection and just release it. And then my marketing girl created them for me almost like within a week. And they were perfect the first time they came out. So I knew it was very aligned when everything just perfectly fell into place for me when I was writing them.
That's beautiful.
Proving there's a God by disappearing and coming back. Just a little trick of mine. It's interesting because all of us suffer or struggle with trials, tribulations, and trauma in our lives. And we go on a quest to figure out religion versus spirituality. And on one of the shows, I forget who told me, but I love the definition of the difference between religion and spirituality. They said that religious people are afraid of going to hell, where spiritual people have been to hell and they're afraid. I kind of I have a very religious family. I fall into the second category more, being a wild child like you. When I say wild child, it lasted up until I was like 36. But even more importantly, I had a lot of trauma and tribulations as well. How much do you think someone needs to be challenged in that way to find more of either their religion and their spirituality?
Well, and let me just say one thing. I think spirituality is also just knowing oneself is really the definition of spirituality, which I think gets very lost in a lot of religions, that if I'm spiritual, that means I'm not a Christian. And I always love to realign that for everybody. But I think that everything is always working in our favor. And if we all just move forward with that, and the world is not against us, but for us, I feel like people's lives will completely change. And religion can fall within all of that. God is for you. He's not against you. He wants you to thrive. He doesn't want you to survive. So we all are going to have moments of survival. But how do we get ourselves out of that survival and turn into thriving again is, I think, the most important part. But I think that religion fits into that just as much. I'm religious. I go to church and I love all those things. But I also think that there's something within me that's just as special as well. God is within me. He created all of us.
Yep.
Yeah, I love saying that, God comes through us, right? And I talked about in fact, I had a conversation with Tom Bilyeu on Monday, because he doesn't believe in anything. He believes in science in this life, and that's it. And I was surprised because we agree on about 80% of our philosophies together. And I said, it's real simple for me. I believe in something bigger than me that loves me more than my mom. So I live my life, and it's through me, not even for me. It's beyond for me, but it's definitely not to me like a victim. And he said, well, how can you prove that? I said, well, here's what I believe. I don't think you could prove what you're saying. And I know I can't prove what I'm saying, but when I can't prove something, I seem to always lean towards the more positive, beneficial opportunity because of my faith. So, if someone says I don't believe in past lives, I'm like, well, prove to me there's not, past or future lives. And I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. But until then, if someone tells me you have a choice, live one life or a million of them, I'm going to choose a million of them. And, it just seems mathematical and positive to me. So anyway, Blaine, we have Brett in the house. Jenna B Spiritual, Jenna B Good, JennaBspiritual.com. The cards will help to provide what I call the mathematical equation of luck. The coincidences, consequences, and karma that you want exist by paying attention to and giving intention to the coincidences that you want. To no better way to create the coincidences that you want in your life than to have positive intention prayer cards to remind, remember, and recollect that we are connected to and through an omniscient, all-powerful, all-knowing source that loves us more than our mom. Thank you for sharing with us and continuing a journey for all of us. And I want you on more of my shows. I know Blaine does too. We keep on doing this disappearance act, but we will have you back. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I love you guys. I always love talking about this stuff. So I'm here anytime.
Awesome. We'll have you back. We love talking about it as well. Jenna Brocious, thanks for joining us on Office Hours. All right, waiting in the wings. And I got jilted at the altar by maybe seeking retribution because I left him for a minute earlier. President and co-founder of Kumo Space is here, kumospace.com. Brett Martin, welcome to Office Hours.
Thank you so much for having me, and certainly would never want to leave you hanging like that. Thanks a lot, David.
Yeah, revenge of the nerd. That's what Blaine, he just left me because I left him. But, there's so much going on in the office spaces in the world and the virtual office platform now with unlimited rooms and customizations. Give me an idea of, that founding necessity that you saw for Kumo Space.
Well, we are a COVID baby, and it started. I run a venture capital firm called Charge Ventures, and we used to throw a monthly networking event where we would invite folks over and they would share deals. And the pandemic hit, and everyone said, "Well, why don't you take this online, take it on a Zoom?" And I said, "I don't really want to give a PowerPoint presentation to 50 of my closest friends every month. That doesn't sound like fun for me or for them." And so we realized that there was really no platform that lets you have multiple people congregate in real time in the same virtual place. And that was how we started. We did a lot of events, and we eventually zeroed in on the sort of virtual office as the biggest need, even post-pandemic. Remote work is here to stay, and if you have 1,000 people working remotely, they need a place to show up to work.
Yeah. How virtual is it? and I mean by that, I do some work with Spatial, Spatial.io, and it's a virtual reality environment. And I've tried to host a couple of meetings there. It's a little kludgy, which isn't. I mean, it's a nascent technology. But how virtual is the virtual space that we're working with here? And what are the accoutrements, if you will, that I could make use of?
Yeah, 100%. I'm not in the business of talking ill of other people in this space. As a venture capitalist, I admire anyone that gets out there and tries to build something novel. But it is a common misconception. I explain what we are, and then people say, "Oh, so are you virtual reality?" And no, we're not. We're not virtual reality. We're actually just a two-dimensional kind of virtual space, like just a simple kind of like video game meets video chat. But because distribution is important, right? Like there's only so many people that have VR headsets, a few million, maybe a few 100,000 active in the world. And at Kumo Space, we already have millions of users. We have people spending 6 hours a day in there. No one is capable of wearing a VR headset for 6 hours. You'll probably vomit. So we're focused on being really easy to use. We have moms and grandmothers and people of all shapes and sizes and different technological literacy using Kumo Space. That's actually a prerequisite to building something that's widely adopted.
And association is so important when it comes to a company's culture. And you can go to a location, even if it's a virtual office, and be able to communicate effectively, locating and utilizing this combination of a more convenient way to talk to one another, but also to locate them. How does the system work in lockstep with company culture? What have you seen as enhancing the culture that a Zoom call won't allow us to do?
Well, I think you said it really well, David. And the way I frame it is people come for the culture. They buy really for the accountability and the visibility. And then they stay for the collaboration. And what I mean by that is everyone who runs a remote or hybrid team, they know that they have a culture problem. They know that if they're not seeing each other regularly, they're not connected. They're not going to build real relationships at work. They're not going to have the trust that helps people get things done quickly. And, they're just going to switch jobs as soon as someone offers them $1 more, right? They buy, the buyers tend to be kind of managers and CEOs and COOs. And they buy because, the same reason everyone's bringing their employees back to the office. They say, "Oh, what's my team doing? How can I help them if I can't see them? How can I get in front of problems early?" And everyone thinks it's micromanaging, but actually it's bringing equity to remote workers. Remote workers have long been kind of second-class citizens. They never get promoted. They don't get the FaceTime with the boss. And so one of the big reasons that folks use virtual office is to put everyone on a level playing field and give you exposure, to the leaders at the company. And then the third element is the collaboration. That's why people stay. And, we have really high retention. I think we've maybe churned 1 a virtual office user since we started selling the product. And that's what you alluded to, which is the ability, the real-time collaboration that's unlocked if everyone's available in the same place at the same time. You can tap people on the shoulder. Again, you can get a quick answer to your question. You don't have to, if you have to iterate on something multiple times, you can do it in the course of a couple hours, not over weeks. And so we see a virtual office, Kumo Space virtual office, as a power tool if you want to be a productive and fast-moving remote team.
I started doing work in the virtual space in the late 90s when I was doing a lot of leadership development work with Nokia. And
you look great, Blaine. Don't date yourself.
Thank you. But we had teams that had composition. I mean, people were from literally all over the globe. And we were, I remember Jessica Lipnack wrote, I think, the very first book on virtual team structures, virtual teams. And I had a conversation with Jessica and her late husband about just kind of how do you structure one of these things? And to their point, collaboration precipitously dropped if there was asynchronous communication. And being able to find a way to synchronize and have synchronous communication actually going on. Now, back in the late 90s, that was, talk about a Herculean task, trying to get everybody on a platform that would be robust enough from a bandwidth perspective to actually facilitate that. We got over the hump barely, but it was an interesting lift. Where you're at right now, what do you see? And this is where I'm going with this, because since the 90s to now, there's been an enormous shift in technology, capability, and access, and willingness to access. From your catbird seat here, Brett, I'm very curious with AI and everything else that's kind of coming in. What do you see the next iteration of this virtual space being, and how quickly do you see it actually appearing?
So, yeah, I mean, we're fortunate to your point that we get to stand on the shoulders of giants. Right? Bandwidth. So much has changed. We've got 5G. We've got all the fiber in the world, and we're definitely sitting on top of that infrastructure. I think if you look at a product like Zoom, right, they were successful because they did one thing and they did it well, and they actually made it work. All the other video providers, they were glitchy and buggy, and Zoom just worked, right? It's not that Zoom is such a lovely, a beautiful, amazing product to use. It just happens to do video quite, and it doesn't break on you, which it was great for the past 10 years. But I think if you look forward to the next 10 years, right, like video that functions is going to be table stakes, and the folks that, build really amazing, collaboration, real-time collaboration platforms are going to have much more surface area, much more ecosystem, right? That one of the cool parts about building Kumo Space in a virtual office, right? You go in and you are your avatar, and you see, every different teams talking and collaborating, screen sharing, presenting, people playing games and playing Tetris with each other. It creates so much more surface area for interactivity and apps. And we have, whiteboards in Kumo Space. We have integrated with Google Docs and with your messaging, and we've got a gong that rings when you make sales. And if you think about the interface that is a virtual office, it's so much wider open than, say, a Zoom Brady Bunch kind of squares where, how many apps can you actually get into that interface? And so I guess, this takes us into dangerous metaverse territory, which, I'm not necessarily going to go on, but, it is true that Kumo Space is probably one of the largest B2B metaverses in the world right now. And, with people spending, people are spending tens of millions of minutes in Kumo Space every month.
That's congratulations.
One of the other surprising things, though, is I'm looking through, all of the arsenal of features and benefits of Kumo Space, and you're an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School as well. I think all the capabilities of Kumo Space also are applicable to the future of education. I mean, I think what's missing in virtual school are all the components that you just listed out, with the collaboration, accountability, the coordination, the tapping on the shoulder, the whiteboards, the professor's office hours. And, you know, when I'm listening and watching you, obviously it's applicable to a virtual office, but I think it's even more applicable to the virtual university and the hybrid that exists there, of being able to provide a better experience for those kids. So hold $60,000 to $80,000 a year to go to school when half the kids are just, you know, jumping on the laptops all the time anyway. So how do you see the future to utilize Kumo space in the education space as well?
Well, David, it's funny. You make a really good point. And, you know, honestly, some of our first, in practice, we have a lot of corporate education going on in Kumo space. So a lot of L&D, sales training, sales enablement seminars, because, you know, if you are teaching a new crop of, you know, financial analysts or, you know, brokers, and they're going through their Series 7 training, and, you know, today the thing is, oh yeah, you send them a video and they watch it at home, which in reality means that they're, you know, moving the mouse every few minutes and cooking dinner and doing everything but watch that video. Whereas some of the folks, customers, you know, we have Primerica as one of our customers. They have new classes of, you know, brokers coming in all the time, and they put them in a virtual classroom. They play a video, and they watch it together in the context of the office. So they, you know, feel all the meetings going on and see the rest of the team working while watching a video, which is a much more engaging experience. So, you know, that's a work use case. But to answer your question more directly, well, you know, when we first started, it's interesting, and we still do have a lot of education users. We had both all top 4 consultancies and a bunch of middle schools all over the world. We actually were, I think, we had, at one point we had several 100,000 Malaysian middle schoolers using Kumo space, and so in my head, I could not fathom. I said, how can these two groups of people be so different, be using the same tool, and in particular, stodgy old consultancies? And so I asked them. I said, you know, no offense. I mean, they're great customers, and I love them, but they're not exactly early.
They're all Blaine.
They're not exactly. They're not early adopters of technology usually. You know, they're conservative. That's their job. I respect that. And they told me, they said, well, we use this to have workshops with Fortune 500 CEOs. And I said, wow, that's crazy. And I said, why do you do that? And they said, you know why? Because it keeps their attention. And if you think about Zoom, right, and experiences, normal video conferencing experiences, they're kind of a webinar. It's a sit back experience, right? You sit back, you turn off your video, and you kind of disengage. Whereas Kumo Space is more like a video game in the sense that it's a lean forward experience. If someone's not paying attention to you, you will literally walk away from them in the virtual space and talk to someone else. And I think that's the same reason that it worked really well for even middle schoolers, is because, you know, I said, wow, it sounds like chaos. Imagine middle schoolers running around your virtual classroom. And the teacher said, you know what? It's better that they're engaged than if they're just checked out.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can see that. And there's so many different applications existing today, but even more in the future. And I really would love it for this conversation. We have other shows as well. Brett Martin, your insight is invaluable as far as understanding how we do engage a totally unengaged audience, which is our workforce today. Over 87% of the people around the world are not engaged in the activity they get paid for. So there's a huge ROI to Kumo Space, that's for sure. Brett Martin, thanks for joining us. Go to kumospace.com if you're looking for a better environment to build your company culture and increase the productivity and accessibility. And of course, since it's Thankful Thursday, even the gratitude of our corporate culture and people. Thanks, Brett, for joining us. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Hey, thank you for having me. Great questions. Be well, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you.
All right. I didn't want to tell him that you and I went to high school together when he said you look so good, but very few people know we're the same age.
There you go.
Rarely tell people.
Humility.
You robbed the cradle with that 30-year-old wife of yours too. You got all things working against you today, Blaine. I don't know. She looks so young.
What can I say? Boy.
Hey, one quick fact before we bring Trisha on here. Well, we're going to bring her on before I engage Trisha. Real fun fact today. that Southern California has more rain as of this date this year than Seattle.
Than Seattle does. Yep.
That's incredible. We are got a green state now, literally a green state for once. I know they all think we have a green state, but it's green and also usually brown in its terrace. But Tricia,
you've also got tornadoes too. So yeah,
that was weird. That was weird.
I know, what is happening?
There's no global change. We'll be fine. No environmental changes at all. Tricia Montalvo, Tim, she's here visiting us. She is an author, speaker, also a board member and thought leader, and DEI advocate, which is one of the primary focuses for Blaine and I as middle-aged white men. We're doing our best to play our part, and I think more people like us should be playing their part, which is why we wanted to have you on. And I love your new book, Embrace the Power of You. You can't find outside of you what you can't find inside of you. Owning your identity at work. Thank you, Tricia, for your patience, but most importantly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me, and thank you for talking about this important topic. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm going to start with a little different question, because a lot of people, when they're talking about DEI and, as a thought leader, they're always focused in on women. I have 3 daughters, 23, 21, and 18. And I said, I understand that we have to empower my girls, my young women, my kids. But don't you think that we should be spending some time teaching the older middle-aged white men to unlearn some things, especially the ones with, really good intentions like Blaine Bartlett? And I will put myself in that category because I know my intentions are good. I want the best for everyone, and we're not giving our best to everyone. And I have to tell you, a lot of times I feel ignored, and I'm a pretty powerful person to help create change, always have been. And I think we need to engage more people that look like Blaine and I in this effort, because we want to be engaged.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And actually, there's a study that either is coming out or has come out that white men want to be part of this conversation and are feeling left out. I think the organization is called PRISM. And oftentimes, either you don't want to be judged, you're afraid to say the wrong thing, and so you're sort of waiting. But no, we absolutely not only need you as part of this conversation, but you actually can help us move the needle. So it's incredibly important. And a lot of the work that I did as being a D&I advocate in my last company was try to bridge the gap. I think one of the unique things that I have is I've been in the boardroom and the C-suite, and I also have been a woman and a woman of color. And so I've been in both spaces. And so I can sort of bridge that and have that conversation in both spaces using, different language. So.
Yeah, and it is, the language of inclusion, the language of diversity, it can be either inclusive language, to the point that David was making a little bit ago, or it can be an exclusionary language structure. And I know that there's a question in that preface, but I just lost my train of thought. in the work that you do, Tricia, how do you actually facilitate a conversation that actually gets somewhere rather than around a circle?
People approach DEI from different perspectives, and my perspective is really to try to create empathy, to try to see what different lived experiences are from different people's eyes. And so I do a lot of storytelling, and I tell a lot of my personal story, so that there's a perspective that someone may not have seen. And once you start creating that empathy, then some of that, I would say armor that we've put up starts coming down, and you're more curious, you're interested in learning, you don't feel judged. And so I think that bridging, again, I think that bridge is a really important word, because I don't like the divisiveness of us, them. I think it's we all, and I think how David started the show, which is we need everyone in this conversation. I'm out, part of my book is to empower people who are struggling to belong and owning their identity, and to help them through the journey. But in the book, I actually specifically have manager strategies at the end of each chapter, so that those leaders that want to create inclusive workplaces have very practical tips based on that journey of that individual reader. And so they can put into real time some strategies to help create inclusive environments. And we need both sets. We need that person to, have the courage and go through their own self-reflection to show up as their authentic self. But we need the environment to be inclusive and belonging and accepting of that. And without each of those two, it's not going to work.
And Trish, I think it's interesting because of that acceptance side. And I think we strayed a little bit too far away from the acceptance side. Because if everyone's going to show up as their authentic self, we have to be more forgiving. Because whether you're a person of color, a man, a woman, tall, short, heavy, light, whatever differences we all have, and I love and appreciate those differences, that if we aren't accepting of someone that needs to unlearn something, a really positive, intelligent, intuitive, inspired employee that just has something to unlearn because grandpappy in Louisiana and mommy in Louisiana, since the day they came out of the womb, have been utilizing certain vernacular or perspectives, and they just don't know better. And everyone's walking on eggshells because they feel there's no forgiveness. And I feel this, I do so many interviews. One of the best pieces of advice that I had is we have, all types of different ways to address people. One of my favorite people, she's executive with YouTube, and she calls herself a queer. And I was like, reading the notes, I'm like, oh, this can't be right. I can't say that she's queer. And I'm like, so I asked interview, hey, what do I do? Because I'm in so many interviews. Some people say, call me an African American. Some people say, call me Black. Some people, who knows what they want me to call them. She said, Dave, I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but why don't you start by asking someone what they want to be called?
Right. Exactly.
This is something I have to unlearn because I don't want to offend anyone. I want to be such a positive influence. And some of these things are simple, but it takes that, like you said, the ability to build a culture that says, hey, we're a forgiving culture. And so let's help each other. What are some of the things, because you have advised some big high-tech companies and small ones, but what are some of the things that you've instituted to give a more forgiving environment and give everyone the benefit of the doubt that we're really have good intentions to help each other?
I love the word forgiving. And I think part of it is really being vulnerable ourselves and saying when we mess up, showing that we mess up, and recognizing that we all are learning. We're all on this journey. Nobody's an expert in this area. And so if we ourselves role model what it looks like to be forgiving, to say, I got it wrong, how can I do better? Then people around you will be more apt to, take the next step and also be forgiving of others. And to your prior point too, we have a lot of focus on increasing diversity at corporations, organizations. But then when they get into the organization, we find that we, as human beings, we tend to want to be around people that are like us. We gravitate towards those people. We like consensus. And so then all of a sudden, someone who's diverse comes into conversation with a different thought, and we're surprised. So the first step is like, don't be surprised, right? We're bringing diverse perspectives into the room for a reason. And so expect diverse thought and not, expect everyone to just come along in the bandwagon. And I think just, again, unlearning some of those things.
It's interesting that whole surprise. It's, when we're looking at emotional intelligence, the foundation of emotional intelligence from a leadership perspective is self-awareness. And anytime I have an emotional reaction to something, I want to be in a position to back up the truck a little bit and go, okay, that's an interesting reaction that I just had. I can call it surprise, but what's the source of that in me? Not what's the source of it out there. What's the source of it in me that is causing me to be surprised? What norm got disrupted? And inviting that kind of a conversation is incredibly useful, and it's authenticity writ large. I have to be vulnerable in order to do that, and then I make that declaration. How is that addressed in your book in terms of owning your own identity? This idea of being able to look back here and go, that was sourced from me.
And being surprise. So the example you just gave of being surprised at something. So for example, what happens to me a lot is people ask me, what do you do? And if I say corporate lawyer, board member, investor, I will say 9 out of 10 times people are surprised. I don't look like what they think a board member or an investor, venture capitalist looks like, whatever that is, right? And that's a microaggression. Those are those little jabs that happen. Yeah. And over time, what that does to someone like me is it erodes my confidence. It makes me feel like I have to now prove that I somehow earned this or whatever that might be, or the acceptance. And so what I can tell you from being in spaces of, let's say, women of color, let's say the surprise happens. If you own that surprise and out it, say, wait, I just noticed I was surprised. I got to examine that. Or what, if you actually out that, I can tell you as a person over here, that would make me just feel, seen, that you noticed it and you said it, because otherwise I'm creating a story over here that you have a bias that you're not unaware of. So again, like owning our own unconscious biases and outing them. I'll tell you, in any space that I am with people of color, they are more than happy to be forgiving when someone says, look, I made a mistake, how can I do better? Mm-hmm. People are really willing to help and say, yeah, let me tell you, in your previous example, David, let me tell you, here's a tip. This would help me if you just ask, what do I want to be called? And then, then the issue goes away.
Yeah, well, this book is one that everyone, especially in the corporate world, in any role, should be reading, Embracing the Power of You, even beyond the corporate world. We can't find outside of us what we can't find inside of us. And I think the title of your next book should be Don't Be Surprised. I think would be the next level of emotional intelligence.
I like that.
Yeah, like Trisha, I'll put an endorsement on there as well and amplify it for you. Trisha Montalvo, Tim, thank you so much. Please come back and join us. We want to learn more to help other people appreciate our differences, and it will only help us all. Please go out, Embrace the Power of You. Author, speaker, board member, thought leader, recovering lawyer, or real lawyer, DI advocate. He is TrishaTim.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you both.
Thanks, Trisha.
All right, Blaine, I got 2 minutes to get downstairs for this thing. So real quick, takeaway of the day.
I'm going to just put it in one word: distribution. And what I mean by that is, we go all, we can look at beer, we can look at ideas, we can look at inclusion, we can look at grace, we can look at the prayer cards as an example. What is it that I'm actually distributing? Yeah. So, becoming a center of distribution and all that actually entails and suggests as a possibility. Each one of our guests today in some way, shape, or form talked about, how do I get what I have out there so I have impact and somebody can use it?
I love it. My takeaway is intention. What we pay attention to and what we give intention to, like the coincidences that we want in all aspects, business, personal, flourishing, whatever it may be, the mindset, the heart set, and the hand set, directly relative to attention and intention. And my intention is to send you light, love, and lessons, my friend. Thank you so much. I'm going to run downstairs. I want to thank everybody. BlaineBartlett.com. This is office hours. Make sure you're more interested than interesting to your future self, and do good deeds. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.